Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year indeed. Don't you just feel totally cleaned, absolved, rinsed of the New England Patriots? This changing of the guard has finally arrived, and hopefully it's here to stay. I talked about this briefly on my video last week, that the Bills have sort of been made in a lot of these games. While it doesn't seem like it, you're just fearing the stigma of the Bills and their propensity to blow leads over the last 2 decades. They are made in a lot of these games, and that was the case on Monday night against New England, of all opponents. Bill Belichick is throwing phones. Challenges aren't going right. They don't complete passes. They had 9 completions for 78 yards total. Jaquan Johnson had a better quarterback rating than Cam Newton and Jarrett Stidham combined. I know that's kind of fluky because it was on a fake punt, which I love, by the way. Always clamoring to throw it to the Gunners when they don't cover them, when the punt return team doesn't cover them. Just throw it out there. And even smarter, they snap it to the up back, which eliminates time. Just makes the play even quicker. And it worked for the Bills. Jaquan Johnson going lefty to Siran Neal. First down. Bills are they're running fakes. They are laughing at New England the entire way. Like I said, I know it's 10-9 early on, but the Bills were made in this game, guys. Second half kickoff comes, and the game is relatively over. We are relaxed watching them play the New England Patriots. It is a beatdown in the fourth quarter. Like, this is just completely new territory for us as fans, but it's pretty fun. It is really fun being good, isn't it? I mean, what is there more to say about this game? Josh Allen, 320 and 4 touchdowns again. Stephon Diggs, 9 for 145 and 3 touchdowns. Shockingly, doesn't win me a fantasy championship. Thank you, Devontae Adams and David Johnson, for destroying that dream for me. Anyway, I don't want to go too far down the fantasy hole right now. But Stephon Diggs, I mean, that trade was worth everything. I would have given up more in retrospect if I know I was going to get 120 receptions for 1,400 yards and 8 touchdowns. This is unbelievable. I hope Cole Beasley is okay. I'm really excited to get John Brown back. Again, on the Beasley thing, it's a bummer that he got hurt on like a kind of an underthrow by Matt Barkley late in that game. And this is also new territory that, we're having starting players or players that are useful to us being injured late in games where it doesn't really matter. Usually if it doesn't matter, it's because we're doing the climbing back. We're down 17 points trying to come back, not because we're just trying to get out of the building. Because the game, again, is made. But so Hope Beasley was announced as week to week by Sean McDermott. Hopefully, knowing Beasley, the type of athlete and person that he seems to be or comes across as, I know that he will work as hard as he possibly can to be ready. I mean, no shot he plays against Miami, that's fine. The Bills have signed a player to the practice squad. They brought in another player to work out one of Josh's teammates. I guess Josh was actually in his wedding party, Tanner Gentry. But they signed Gary Jennings to the practice squad. They're reportedly going to sign Kenny Stills, although that information that has not become official, I guess I should say, at least to this point. Maybe that helps them. The guy's a bit of a deep threat. He can play in the slot a little bit. I think a lot of people are reading into it too far, like, oh, Beasley must really be hurt. I think it's possible. It is possible that they would shelf him, put him on IR. He misses maybe 3 games, and you get him back for the AFC Championship if you're planning to be there, which if you're the Bills have to plan on being there. But I would rather keep him available for Wildcard weekend or for divisional round, as I would want him available on a weekly basis, not know when he's going to come back. Like, oh, we can't use him until the AFC Championship at the earliest. But I don't know. I think fans got way too excited about the Kenny Stills news. I think that he's a fine player. I don't think he's as good as Beasley. I don't think he's as good as Brown. I don't think he's as good as Diggs. He's like the 4th wide receiver and a serviceable fill-in. Somebody who can stretch the field for you. Kind of in the manner of John Brown, maybe a little bit different because he tends to work the slot a bit more, and John Brown hardly ever works the slot for them. Maybe the Bills just want bodies for Sunday against Miami because they're planning on resting their starters. I'm not really going to talk too much about about the Dolphins, about this week's game against the Dolphins. I think I'd rather. We'll talk a little bit about the strategy of it, I suppose, but I'd rather look at the playoff opponents at this point. I have avoided doing that up to this point because there's been so many different scenarios, but I think now that we're in Week 17, it is finally time to talk about it. We've kind of narrowed it down to a couple of different teams, but first I did want to say that hopefully Cole Beasley is okay. Hopefully John Brown is okay. It seems he was activated from IR, but was placed on the COVID list, and like that looming factor is so frightening to fans, probably to the teams too. Like, look at the Dolphins, for example. Not that we've been led to believe by the coach and everyone that they were going to start Ryan Fitzpatrick on Sunday or in the playoffs. That we've been led to believe, like I said, that Tua is going to be their guy and that Fitzpatrick is like their closer. That's what Brian Flores called him. Like, if we need to go to Fitzpatrick as our closer, as our relief pitcher, we will do that. But now he is on COVID, so he is unavailable. He tested positive, so he's not even a close contact. So he's unavailable Sunday, and who knows if they make the playoffs. Is he available the Wildcard weekend, like 10 days? After 10 days testing positive? I'm not sure. So hopefully John Brown is just a close contact, it appears, to TJ Yeldon. But, like, that's... Like, I haven't really been super nervous about that because the Bills haven't been too drastically affected by it. I know against Arizona, right? I believe it was against Arizona. It was like Norman had tested positive, so Levi Wallace couldn't travel, and a couple of other guys. They had the tight end room that was a little affected by it, but nothing major. Nothing like Cam Newton testing positive, like Lamar Jackson testing positive, like for their respective teams. But fingers crossed. Let's hope that everyone stays healthy, whether in terms of COVID, whether in terms of, just nagging injuries. Anyway, it's a good lead-in to the Bills playing the Dolphins this weekend. I'm not entirely sure what to expect. I'm not super impressed by Tua Tagovailoa. I guess that's how it's pronounced. I've heard Tagovailoa. I don't know. Tua. I'm not super impressed by Tua thus far. I think he has been relatively fortunate at times by the defense being good, by the special teams being good. He has completed 65% of his passes, 10 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, and they are 6-2 in his starts. Although I guess, does Fitz get the win against the Raiders? I mean, what a game that was. I don't really want to talk about it too much because whatever, but the Raiders, of course. Anyway, I guess I want to look at the Dolphins more of a playoff opponent than a Week 17 opponent at this point. I don't know how realistic it is that the Bills are going to play the opponents. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the likelihood of playing each team. Now, I think in order to play Miami in Wildcard Weekend, the number one thing that has to happen in all scenarios, I guess there's 6 different scenarios. I'm reading these off of Buffalo Rumblings. This guy, Nick, did a great amount of work, and I'm going to read it. I mean, not necessarily word for word, but this is where I'm getting this information from. In order to play the Dolphins, the Bills must beat the Dolphins in Week 17. Now, how likely do we think that is? I think the Bills are, while in line for the 2 seed currently, they might see Pittsburgh resting Ben Roethlisberger and resting T.J. Watt and a couple of other guys and think, they're not necessarily trying to beat Cleveland. We don't necessarily have to try to beat Miami. I think they will maybe just keep guys in the routine, kind of like they did in Week 17 last year against the Jets. Josh goes out there for a drive or 2, maybe even weather pending. But other than that, I wouldn't expect to see a whole lot of them. I think maybe Davis Webb gets a call up from the practice squad. Maybe Duke Williams gets called up from the practice squad. And we see a lot of the backups throughout most of the day, wherever they can. I don't think we're going to see Beasley, obviously, because of the injury. I don't think we're going to see much of Stephon Diggs. And like I said, Allen especially. I think that the Bills will remember last season. I think that McDermott is the type that would remember how like Levi Wallace was injured in Week 17 last year, and they had to go to Kevin Johnson, who played pretty well in the playoff game against Houston. But I think they would like to avoid those types of situations at all costs, obviously. So I think that they will rest players. I don't think the 2 or 3 seed really matters to the Bills. If Pittsburgh wins, if the Bills are the 3 and Pittsburgh wins, the Bills go to Pittsburgh. They've already beat Pittsburgh. I don't think they're really intimidated by Pittsburgh. I don't think they're really intimidated by anyone, to be honest with you. And why should they? They're 12-3. And they've achieved the mission. Avoid Arrowhead until AFC Championship weekend, because that's your top competition. I don't know. You could lose in the playoffs, I suppose, but you have to view Kansas City as your top competition to be this AFC Super Bowl representative. Anyway, again, back to Miami. The Bills must beat them in Week 17 in order to play them. I'm not entirely sure that's going to happen because I think Miami needs to have it, and I'm not sure the Bills will play to have it. So, here's a prediction right off the top. Miami 23, Bills 16. There. Anyway, let's move on. There are 6 different ways the Bills can play the Dolphins. They all include the Bills beating the Dolphins. I'm not entirely sure that's going to happen. What do we think is most likely to happen? Let's say the Bills lose, the Browns have to win, and the Steelers are resting, so maybe the Browns beat the Steelers. We think Baltimore's probably going to beat the Bengals. I would agree. I would think Indy's going to beat the Jags. I would think Tennessee is going to beat the Texans, because most of these teams need to win. The Colts and the Titans are still playing for the division there because they're both 10-5. So if the Bills lose, the Steelers lose, Tennessee and Indy win, and Baltimore wins, which I think is not out of the realm of possibility here, the Bills would play the Cleveland Browns Wildcard weekend. In order for the Bills to play the Browns, the Bills and Steelers must have the same outcome. So the Bills and Steelers must both win or lose. Obviously, a tie throws serious wrenches into this, and I don't have that information. I think the Bills are a bad matchup for the Browns. I think the Browns are a good matchup for the Bills because I don't fear anybody on defense. I know Myles Garrett is a game wrecker back there. The Bills have played T.J. Watt. They've played Aaron Donald. They've beaten them both. So I'm not entirely intimidated by him. I know that he is capable of getting to Allen, of creating game-changing plays, fumbles, sack fumbles, etc. I trust the Bills' offense to score points. Cleveland is the type of team that, kind of like Baltimore in a way, I feel like if they get down early, like look at Baltimore last year in the playoffs. A lot of people, I think, are intimidated by Baltimore. I'm not entirely sure why, because Lamar hasn't been great in the playoffs yet. But last year in the playoffs, Baltimore gets down to Tennessee, and it's just, well, what do we do now? Cleveland, I feel like, is kind of the same way. They would rather run the ball. Like, look at last week. They had no receivers, and Baker Mayfield has a career high in passing attempts. It just didn't really make sense. They ended up losing to the Jets, and an opportunity that could have got them the division, a game for the division in Week 17 against the Steelers. And they got down early in that too, and then they just started throw. That's how I want to approach them. I would like to get up early on them. Maybe you just get a couple stops. I know it's easier said than done, guys, but I feel like if Cleveland, if Baltimore, maybe even if Buffalo, I think this argument could be made for the Bills because we haven't really seen the Bills play from behind too much, with the exception of Tennessee, to be honest with you, and they got clobbered in that game. But if Cleveland and Baltimore are playing from behind, I think it completely transforms the way that they will approach the game, the way that they will play offense, maybe even the way they play defense, and their strategies, and the strategies they employ. Cleveland, with Kevin Stefanski, much more of a running team. Obviously, Baltimore, much more of a running team. And if you get up 14-0 on them, you change. You obviously change it. You change the way that they'll play. Now, there's 12 different ways the Bills could play the Ravens. I can't find a rule, like a universal rule in there. There's 4 scenarios if the Bills win and 8 if the Bills lose. I'm obviously not going to go through all of them. There's just the most amount of scenarios that could, allow the Bills to play the Ravens. But where is... Okay. The one I was talking about, obviously. Pittsburgh and Buffalo lost, Tennessee and Indy win, Baltimore win. That leads you to the Browns. We talked about the Dolphins. How do we get to the Titans or the Colts? In order to play the Colts, the Titans and Colts must both win, which I think is going to happen. So then it would come down to the Bills winning or losing, and then Pittsburgh winning or losing. They play the Colts. Let's just assume that Tennessee and Indy win. They play the Colts if the Bills and the Ravens win and the Steelers lose. Or if the Bills and the Ravens lose and the Steelers win. Or if they all lose. I know that this is confusing, guys, and I apologize. I'm going to go just a little bit over my time here because I do want to address over my normal time of 15 minutes. I do want to address all of these situations. But in order to play the Colts, the Titans and Colts must both win. In order to play the Titans must lose, and the Colts must win. I don't think the Titans are going to lose. Like I said, I think the most likely scenario is that the Bills and Steelers lose, and then the other three teams, Tennessee, Indy, and Baltimore, win, in which case the Bills would play the Browns. If all five of them win, Bills win, Steelers win, Tennessee, Indy, Baltimore, they'll play the Dolphins. I don't really have a term of ranking in terms of opponents here. I'm not intimidated too much by Cleveland. I'm not intimidated by Tua and Miami. I know, like I said, alluded to earlier, a lot more people are intimidated by Baltimore. And I understand that. They have like a championship pedigree, a really tough defense. They played the Bills very good in 2019. So I understand that perspective. However, I've watched Lamar play 2 playoff games and they have been lackluster. So that obviously can change. Lamar has been a fantastic player. I'm trusting this Bills team. I really am. Like, look at since the bye week, the only teams to go over 300 yards against the Bills are the Chargers. They got 367 and 55 on a fluke Hail Mary towards the end. And the Niners. And the Bills were made in that game. Like, the Bills have scored at least 26 points in every game other than that 4-week stretch where they went 2-2, Tennessee, Kansas City, the Jets, and New England. They've scored at least 26 points in every game since New England. That's 7 games, 2-5-7, yes. 38, 48, 34, 26, 27, 30, 44. Trust the Bills. Trust this offense. It works. It will continue to work. I know playoff football is a little different, but stay optimistic with me, guys. Guys, I'm going to talk to you all next week. We're going to have a Wildcard weekend game to preview. Hit me up on Twitter. My Twitter handle and YouTube username are the same. Enjoy your weekend. Have a happy new year. As always, above all else, go Bills.